What makes a memorable game? Is it the amount of users that plays it? Or the amount of features it offers? Maybe it's something unique that can't be explained. Regardless, in my opinion, Mirage had it all. It was a free online role-playing game source, far before its time, that offered indie developers a chance to shine. So, how was it developed? Why did so many people use it? And what is the true story behind the infamous hacker named PC who terrorized the early days of Mirage? A man by the name of Chris Creamer, or more commonly known as Consti, was born in Wisconsin in the US. As a kid, Consti wanted to be an astronaut. He was a dreamer. He played some basketball growing up, but was never really into sports. And as soon as he started using computers, he knew he wanted to be a game developer. He began programming at the age of 14, back in 1995. He first used QBasic, and after that moved on to Pascal. Consti grew up as an only child, and relied on himself to learn through trial and error. You might say that Consti had a talent for programming, but it took a lot of hard work in order to reach his goals. Consti has always been a big fan of Odyssey Online. He played it back in 1999 and was blown away by its simplicity and sheer fun factor. Odyssey didn't hold your hand. It felt like a light version of Ultima Online. This also got Consti very interested in MMORPG design and development. So he started working on a competitor. It started out as Final Fantasy Online, developed in Visual Basic 6. This became the prequel to what was to come. Consti had learned a lot from making it and was only 19 years old at the time. He wanted to have a game that felt like Odyssey but looked like Final Fantasy, a mix between the two. In late 2001, Consti decided to rewrite it from scratch, and after 2 weeks of intense work, the first prototype of Mirage Online was born. This is where the story begins. The name Mirage came from a previous single-player RPG Consti developed in 1998 called Mirage the Rebellion. It was written for DOS using Borland Pascal. It was a basic pixel game, and Consti always liked the name of it. He wanted a unique game name, and Mirage stood out. The idea was to have a game where the world is a dream, a series of mirages that people live in, and that's why the game always had all the game editors built in, so that you could make new experiences in real time. Consti was just 20 years old when he first started Mirage. He was attending a community college while working at a fast food joint. Mirage became his final project for his VB6 programming class. What Consti had created was something great, especially considering this was way back in 2001, where most of the games were made by big studios. It would have been easy to cut too many corners, or even overdo aspects of Mirage. But Consti made things just right, and this started an era of drama that lasted more than 10 years. Mirage was made in Visual Basic 6. This was a programming language, which at the time was the most popular language in the world. Visual Basic 6 was created by Microsoft and released in the mid-1998. Its main usage was for Windows applications, but this didn't stop Consti from creating something unique. Visual Basic 6, or more commonly known as VB6, consisted of a visual editor with code behind. In simple terms, this meant that you could easily create applications that looked just like Windows at the time. The code behind allowed the programmers to add actions that were triggered when inputs were made. The simplicity that VB6 offered helped Consti create Mirage in such a short time. Mirage consisted of two projects, the game client and the server. These communicated with each other through TCP using a component called WinSock. The client sent requests and the server answered. Mirage was intended to be a simple game, but its journey had just begun. In late 2001, Mirage Online had more than 10,000 active accounts and averaging 70 online players at a time. This is when Consti decided to sell Mirage to a person who went by the name of Shannara. Consti did not sell it for the money, but more about this later. For now, Shannara used Mirage to create his own game, which ran for a few years. He also decided to sell the source to a person named Kyle, but with the ability to continue using it for himself. So while Shannara was working on his game Mirage Online in 2002, Kyle was working on a game engine known as Playworlds. Playworlds was a closed-source online role-playing game engine, free to use, and shortly after gained a massive fan base. Many felt that Playworlds was perfect. It didn't have the option to customize game interface, but the default interface held up for its time. It's important to remember that this was an era where indie games was still a rarity compared to today. Since both Mirage and Playworlds was made from the same source code, both share the same flaws. This is where a hacker known as PC started his terror. He got his hands on the source code from both Mirage Online and Playworlds. At this point, Shannara was sick and tired to fight back against PC, so Shannara decided to release Mirage to the public. In late 2003, Mirage Source was born. The 29th of December 2003, a website was set up. Originally founded by Jan Gunther, also known as Granite, was now owned by Shannara. Mirage was now officially free to use for anyone who wanted to make a game. It was now an open source game engine that quickly gained popularity. There were two versions, MS303 and MS307. The difference between them was that the 303 version stored all the game data in text files, while the 307 version used SQL to store the data in a database. A lot of people tried their luck with Mirage, many of whom had little to no previous experience, so there were exploits and bugs that followed, but the community was friendly and assisted with help if asked for. For the members, the dream of being a game developer was born. Features was passed between creators through tutorials consisting of mostly copy and paste code, meaning some big shortcuts could be made. But in the end, this spawned hundreds of indie game developers who may be working with programming today. There was one closed source engine that rivaled that of Playworlds. In 2004, Confuse was released. Confuse was made by three people: Coke, also known as Liam, and GSD, short for God Sent Death, and Unreal. They had created the next step of evolution for Mirage. It was packed with new features that not many people had. The entire interface was new and stylish. It offered scrolling maps, which was a feature not many had in their games at the time, and only a few programmers offered that feature for sale. Confuse made some money from a VIP system that granted some players the ability to slightly request customized games. It also offered a secret forum board where they could easier talk to Coke and GSD. The community of Confuse thrived for some time, until all of a sudden Coke and GSD had a falling out, and GSD decided to release the Confuse source code to the public. From the ashes of a great closed game engine started a new era in its development as an open source engine. People quickly put their hands on this feature-packed source code. Over the next years, the normal Confuse source spawned the following versions: Confuse Milestone, Confuse Debugged, Elysium Milestone, Elysium Debugged, Elysium Debugged, Elysium Diamond 1, Elysium Diamond 2, Elysium Diamond 3. And all of these versions spawned tons of sub-versions, such as Beverias, Essence, Eclipse, and many more. Eclipse was based on the Elysium Debugged version, and was started by a person named Marsh. This was another closed source engine, which gained a fairly large user base. Liam, one of the former creators of Confuse, later went on to start a game called Mirage Realms, based on the original MS version. And today he has rewritten it in Java and has a very successful game running. A lot of people participated in the work on the Confuse source over time, but the Elysium versions was mostly under the care of two people by the name of Pingu and Ozzy. But as everything good comes to an end, it was time for Elysium to shortly become part of history. Meanwhile all of this, Mirage Source had been in development as well, and the 16th of July in 2005, the Mirage Source engine build 1 came out. It didn't offer new features, but instead focused on bug fixes, since Mirage was a base source where the developer could take many routes to make a unique game. Around the year 2005 and forward, a person by the name of Verrigan began making very strong contributions to the community. He is most remembered for his custom modified IOCP socket system and custom packet buffer, and the famous byte array packet system, which meant that the size of the packet sent between the client and server was heavily reduced. This was truly amazing for the time and helped the developers reach an extra level in their game performance. At this point, the old Mirage game that Consti made way back had spawned thousands of games. The 5th of January in 2007, Shannara had decided to sell Mirage Source. It was purchased by a person from Sweden who went by the name of William. A new release was planned, and in early 2008, Mirage Source Engine Build 2 was released. This new version replaced the old interface that's been with Mirage for the last 6 years, and turned it into something more clean and easy to work with for new members. It also contained optimizations and bug fixes that's been discovered over time. Later the same year, a big collaboration began to produce a new heavily optimized and improved version. MSC3 was a developing build and was never really fully released because there were so many changes continuously being made. Instead, Mirage Source 4 was released. The people responsible for this build was DFA, Dugor, Genesis, Giaken, Dave and Anthony. Little was known then, but this would be the last attempt to bring Mirage back to its golden days. Even though the community was getting smaller, there was still a lot of games in development, but many more that has since long been shut down. Let's take a tiny peek at some of those games that were still around. Fade Online. Created by a person now known as Matt, but previously went by the name of Perfect, it offered a huge in-game world with good potential for gameplay. Silverdale. The game was started in 2007 by Mythlomion and later received assistance from a person by the name of Robin. It had amazing interface graphics and offered PvP, dungeons and bosses. Nin Online. Started by a person now known as Rory, it was a work in progress back in 2008, and this might still be active, although it's unconfirmed if it's still Mirage or not. Key to Heaven. Created and finished by William, who at the time was the owner of Mirage. The game offered leaderboards, custom graphics, and a full game of content. Today, Key to Heaven is being ported to .NET, and once finished, it will be available to play on Steam. If you go to this website, you can be part of the new launch. Final Saga. Started by Exlitan back in 2009 using the MS-303 version. Today it's being redeveloped in C# to take advantage of what .NET has to offer. Secrets of Mirage. This is one of the older games that's still up and running from the early Mirage era. It began in 2002 and has since evolved into something quite special. While the community of Mirage was developing games and engines, Consti was actually working on a fairly secret project that he did not tell many people about. Between 2008 and 2010, Consti was developing a new version of Mirage in Java. However, this project was never finished. It ultimately was too exhausting programming a graphical user interface using Swing, and Consti didn't want to make all the built-in editors using it. He had also attempted a ActionScript version of Mirage during the same time. The server was the same, but this also became unfinished due to similar circumstances. The reason he tried to use Flash was because it was very simple for people to get in and play using it. Consti didn't consider these two projects as failures. Instead, he started planning for the future. In 2012, William had decided to sell Mirage due to the lack of time and dedication he could offer the community. He had spent a lot of time maintaining the Mirage community, working on his game Key to Heaven, and studying to become a computer engineer. A few people offered interest in purchasing it, and two of them was Shannara and James. James had previously shown interest in shutting Mirage down for his own personal reasons. So instead, Mirage was sold back to Shannara, which seemed like a good choice at the time. Little did William know that just a few days later, Shannara had sold it to James, with the reasoning that he needed quick cash, which meant that overnight, Mirage was gone. The 27th of May in 2012, William brought Mirage back from the grave. It was no longer under the .com domain. Instead, it was now mirageshores.net. William made a promise to the community that the site will remain as is till the end of time. And so it is. Almost 8 years has passed since that day, and the site remains for nostalgia for the people who lived the era that was Mirage. So, what is the true story behind the infamous hacker named PC? To understand this, we need to cover everything that went on between Consti, Shannara, and PC way back in 2001. Consti met Shannara in an IRC chat room named Era Online, where Consti still hangs out today. This was originally a community of people that played Era Online, a MMORPG from a long time ago. Shannara offered to buy Mirage, and Consti agreed, because he had difficulties handling the popularity that Mirage Online had gained when also dealing with school and work. Later on, Shannara did breach the terms of agreement with Consti. To put a long story short, he removed Consti's name from the credits. Even the special thanks section, that was one of the things that he asked to remain. Shannara actively worked to remove Consti from the history books. He He disagreed with it being part of the sale because it wasn't in the original payment details. Consti offered to give back the money Shannara had previously paid, but he rejected their request. In 2019, the hacker so-called PC reached out to William and expressed an interest in sharing what actually happened from his point of view. So let's try to set the history straight as best we can with some of the earliest unknown memories. Before Player Worlds, when Shannara was the owner of Mirage in early 2002, PC was hinted to try out Mirage Online from a friend. At this time, PC was between 14 and 15 years old. PC and his friends had found ways to crash Shannara's game server very easily and abused that for several days until Shannara shut down the server in defeat. PC had 2 associates. Little is known about them other than one being named Travis, who was more into the trolling and scouting expeditions, and the other person was named Unknown. It was him and PC that did the hard work. PC explained further that when he found out who the original creator of Mirage Online was, he searched for Consti and got in contact with him. After the attacks against Mirage Online, PC shifted his attention to Play Worlds. According to PC himself, he had full access to all the Play Worlds hosted servers. The history is a little unclear on exactly where PC obtained Mirage from, but it was either from Consti's old Mirage Online website or from Shannara's website. PC and his friends first gained access to Mirage Online source code, and within 3 days they had also gotten Play World source code. Consti was rather angry about the situation, and he feels he didn't protect it well enough. Both Mirage and Play Worlds used their dedicated servers as backups for the source code, and this was how they had obtained it. There was no direct HTTP link to the downloads, but by searching the servers, the files was found. This was a common way to hide files back in the early days, and if you could guess well, you could get files you were not supposed to have. At some point, a letter was written by a person with an unknown identity, and today the content of it is lost, and the only reference to it is from here. This is part of a larger document written by Shannara in anger and was included in the MS-303 version. If clicking the address, it brings you to a pix.pdf file that is no longer to be found. Sometime after this, in 2003, PC had decided to start a new MMORPG using Mirage. Out came Uber RPG. All that remains today from this game is this screenshot. According to PC, Shannara released Mirage as open source after Uber RPG took off. This information conflicts with what Shannara said previously and can therefore not be taken for certain. PC claims that Uber RPG had fixed the security issues that Mirage Online had and was offering to help the other parties to fix them. But at that time, the trust in PC was long gone. Today, in the year 2019, PC is 31 years old. When he was asked the question whether or not he was the villain in the Mirage story, he responded with, "I definitely took a villain role for quite a while." At one point, PC had asked Consti how it should be released, and Consti told him that he was a fan of the GPL license, so PC had went with that. Consti did not know about the real motivation behind PC's release though, and PC says he had asked Consti as a sign of good faith. According to Consti, Shannara then released the game to the public domain to suppress PC's release. Now, let's end the story of Mirage where we began, with Consti. Consti was asked the question if he thought Mirage would have been open source if it went any other way, and he responded with yes. His worry was that the game was going to become too popular for VB6 to properly scale. At best, VB6 can handle only about 70 to 100 players concurrently. Once the game surpassed that, he would have had to come up with a way to horizontally scale or run separate servers with a shared database backend, but even that has its limits. Financially, it wouldn't have been possible for Consti given the position he was in life. He was not self-sustaining at the time. So he would have informed everyone to enjoy what was made and make something of their own. So ultimately, there would have been a monetary trigger that would have resulted in the release of the source code. Once the game became too popular for his home cable modem to handle. And that was one of the reasons he sold it. He thought Shannara would take it to the next level and would open source it at a later date. He wasn't against keeping it closed source in the short term. The problem with open sourcing any online gaming engine is people no longer want to play content. They want to make content and own something. Once everyone gets there are no players left, and the community fragments to smaller and smaller pieces. But at some point, once all the fun has been experienced in the one, it makes a lot of sense to release the source to ensure the survivability of the experience. During the years of Mirage, a lot of people have asked Consti why he was so distant during the drama-filled years of Mirage and that he disappeared almost entirely from the scene. This was because during his younger years, he was a very private and extremely antisocial individual. He says it's kind of ironic that he made a game designed to bring people together just so that he could ghost everyone. But in all honesty, he felt like it was a way to connect with people and have something in common. When he finally sold the game, he immediately felt disconnected from it. And that triggered him to pretty much go into hiding. Consti has since gotten over a lot of his antisocial tendencies, and he now knows how to speak with people. But he's still a very private and reserved individual until he gets to know someone. So what is Consti doing today? In the summer of 2015, Consti began working on a new project called Mirage Classic. This time the client was developed entirely using HTML5 using JavaScript with no third-party libraries. The server is also in JavaScript using Node.js. A good quarter of the source code is shared between the client and the server, so it helped reduce development time. Consti started this project because he was disappointed in the lack of web-based MMORPGs. He wanted to make a more accessible Mirage, and it's looking like that's finally happening. The old game Consti loves, called the Odyssey, have had a declining community for many years now, and in the past couple of years, the old database for the old main server he used to play on in 1999 was put on GitHub. So Consti started to convert the database to Mirage, and is trying to use the Mirage Classic web engine to help revitalize the Odyssey community, and that's what he's now accomplished. The game may go open source in the future, but it's not ready for that yet in Consti's honest opinion. Mirage Classic is still being developed to this day, as a part-time hobby. The main reason why he's developing Mirage Classic is because to this day he haven't seen anyone really capture that vision of a simple 2D MMORPG that is accessible in today's world. VB6 is becoming harder and harder to get working in a modern operating system, and it's contributing to the decline of MS-based games. He wanted something that is easy for anyone to get in and play and requires no download or install to enjoy. The days of downloading executable files from random websites is gone, so getting something that can be played by simply pointing your web browser to a website and starting to play is incredibly important. Mirage Classic is unique in this way, and it's the reason why Consti chose JavaScript. He would have chosen it sooner had HTML5 been adopted more quickly, and that would have alleviated him from trying to make a Flash version of it as well. Mirage Classic can be accessed and played right now if you visit this website. This covers the story of Consti and Mirage. If I know Consti right, I don't think this is even the last project we see from him. Let's wait and see what the future holds. But for now, the history ends. Until next time.